everything. And I think that has to do a lot with what you were talking about earlier, communication from the Trump administration. I have two questions I'd like to delve into a little bit this morning, if possible.
All right, have at it.
Okay, the first one is, and this is kind of funny because last night we were watching the news, my wife and I, and she said, "Why are the Democrats so hateful of Trump?" I said, "Well, that's history because it goes back to money. It really does go back to money. And over 100 years ago, 1913, with the Federal Reserve Act, as it was in place, was an effort to recreate the control by the British crown or empire over us. But basically, it started the way with the presidency in 1913 to go to the progressive manner, which FDR, or not FDR, Teddy Roosevelt continued all the way through FDR. But what's interesting to me is the money came about because of one, Joseph Kennedy. He had an exclusive contract to import Scotch whiskey. However, that was sort of cut short when the
Prohibition
and abolition came in, and prohibition in particular. And so he used bootlegging with Al Capone and the Bella Story family out of Chicago to import illegally Scotch whiskey. Now, what's interesting about that is Bella Story family controlled a lot of the crime in Wisconsin and out of Chicago. And that brings us to Leo Wanta, which is kind of strange. But Leo was placed in Wisconsin to keep tabs on the Bella Story crime families and to see if they can stop them. At the same time, the Kennedy operation had an exclusive forfeiting contract, which was up until just recently going full bore. And with the progressive government in the U.S. From 1913 on, they dug holes underneath the structure to get at the roots to disseminate monies in a covert manner around the world. And in particular, and if you understand history, you'll know that Chicago was a hotbed of support for communism in the early 20s, big time, even all the way through World War II. So Leo was placed there to keep tabs on this and to actually stop it. And what's interesting in that, out of that operation, he was actually convicted, Leo. And Leo had death threats against him. So they pulled him out and he went to Washington. And he worked in the White House under the Reagan administration at that time. And they could not even stop the death threats coming forward. So they put him on a plane to China with Reagan's entree to Mao Zedong to find a way to come together. And what they found was that through Leo, they found a connection. He landed there as the first American since World War II. And he had this message from Reagan that somehow they could help China become part of the World Trade Organization, WTO. That led the coordination with Howe Kwok and Leo Wanta in doing a major forfeiting operation out of Singapore with Citibank. And that settlement allowed them to fund in an enormous way China's entry to WTO. Now, as a result of the progressive governments, which I'm going to go into in a second here, there were avenues that allowed U.S. money, taxpayer money, to be funneled covertly offshore. And again, this goes back basically to World War II, with the economic warfare that was developed by the OSS out of Buffalo, New York, by Donovan to Washington. And out of that came structured schooling of those people to help do this. And out of that came Bill Casey. And they were using the Morgenthau fund. It was a fund based that came from actually McKinley with his tariffs, which was huge. And that money was then put into boxes with precious metals, 1931, 1933 silver certificates sent over to Chiang Kai-shek. Now, it's interesting how all this merges. After World War II, Truman decided that he wanted to do away with the OSS, so he disintegrated the OSS operation. Most of the people from OSS went to the State Department, and the State Department became a great covert operation. When Eisenhower came in, he brought back into place Owen Meadows, who then became Delmarva Timber Trust, and Bill Casey, which then actually ran this money. The reason why Eisenhower brought these two gentlemen back into service after they were discharged from the OSS, and they both were OSS, is that there was no one that Eisenhower trusted out of the democratic operations of going back to 1913, after FDR's 12 years plus, and then Truman. So there was nobody that Eisenhower could trust with the money. So he formulated a plan that these two gentlemen would run the money. And that brought us into the Marshall Plan to reconstruct Europe, which also led to the Iranian oil crisis of the 1950s. And then we went obviously into Vietnam. Now, prior to Vietnam, there was the Eagle II program that was conceived by the two brothers. I'm sorry, I can't at the moment. I can't remember the name. But they began the beginnings of the CIA, and that was the Eagle II program. Then found a way to fund the CIA off balance sheet. That increased the volume of monies going covertly from the United States out of the taxpayers' monies offshore to where they can come back as on the books money. The LBJ was a big proponent of that. Then we got into Reagan with Bush Sr., and Bush Sr. Pretty much orchestrated this operation and utilized Reagan's anti-communism to come up with the National Security Decision Directives, NSDD 32, 66, and 75, orchestrated and run by Casey, which basically said we can do anything and everything under the sun to destroy the Soviet Union. That enhanced these monies going offshore. It enhanced the covert operations of what I now call the REX. And that's one of the operations that we can track through all the way through the early 2000s up until 2013. The biggest problem that I have currently is this. The election that we have just gone through, which brings us to the second question. The danger signs are evident now, and we're seeing it, because the problem is that with this covert money going offshore and going to various parties, including Soros, who helped fund Soros defraud the British Kingdom of their pound, we now have a situation where under the Bush W, he brought in a dumbing down educational system. That core curriculum has done more to destroy this country than anything else. Education is where we start from. And the education that you and I, Mark, had no longer exists. We have generations coming out of an educational system that are basically too dumb to operate. And that's exactly what they want. That follows through with what the communist program that you illustrated just a few minutes ago, that's where that comes from. So my problem with this is Trump has already disabled or dismantled the educational system to throw it back to the states with one problem. He hasn't told them what they should have in their system. He's told them what they can't have, CRT and all this other stuff. But he has not told the states what is mandatory. That is civics. That is pro-America education. And I have a real problem with it. The difficulty is with this last election has really shown us that without that educational system, we're going to elect what are called useful idiots, which we're seeing a lot of, to continue the decrease and the elimination of the United States of America. I have a real problem with that. And my problem with Trump is, and this is a critique, not really a devastating statement, he has forgotten the little people. He's promoting MAGA, but he's forgotten that MAGA is the little people. And those of us who are suffering and dying and worried about tomorrow, he has ignored us because he has picked up a proposal that I put with my 300 documents that I submitted in 2019 to him. And out of that document, I did a confidential affidavit promising in writing that when the gold treaty is executed, I will take a portion of the funds that I'm getting using the forfeiting platforms, and I will commit $30 trillion to the increase and betterment of the infrastructure of America. He's taken, on a joint venture basis, by the way, he's taken that idea and has gone around the world opening up pocketbooks of the foreign investors in the United States. But that doesn't help you and I. That doesn't help the RV. It forestalls the RV. And that is the problem that I have today.
JD Vance actually did a piece earlier this week saying that is part of their problem is because they've lost that sight of what was important to make America great again was for the working class, for the middle class and the working class. And that's where the focus needs to be. And he's like, I'm dedicated. We're going to push. And it appears based on how Trump's responded later in the week that JD, maybe they had a sit down or a talk, or maybe it's just optics and for our television, but it seems that that is the focus again.
I quite agree. I'm beginning to see more outlets like this morning in Fox, they were talking about this a lot, which I thought was kind of interesting, since I stayed up half the night doing notes on this diatribe, quote unquote. But it's disheartening to me. And the problem that I really see, and I really blew up yesterday and Monday, not only because of what my brother was going through, but because I was being harassed on a National Republican Committee. They were calling me, they were emailing me, and they were sending me texts. And finally I was called, and I told them, look, you want my advice? My advice is Trump sign and execute the gold treaty. Until that time, I'm not putting a dime forward because the rhinos are controlling the Senate. And I want them out. But the only way to get them out is to force the RV. And I believe the problem is this. Trump, like everybody else since Bush Sr. has gotten in office, everybody who's